Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Ellie McKissick. My pronouns are they, them, and I will be presenting Throw Over Your Man, I Say, Sapphic Writers of the 19th Century. Content warnings for tonight's presentation include discussions of domestic violence, infidelity, homophobia, suicide, and death. We're going to start our journey tonight at the end of the 18th century. Anne Lister was born on April 3rd, 1791 in Yorkshire, England, and died on September 22nd, 1840, in what is modern-day Georgia. That is the country, not the state. She is well known as the first modern lesbian. Over the course of her lifetime, she was a prolific diarist, writing over 5 million words. A large section of her diary was written in code, one that wasn't deciphered until the 1980s. These sections describe her lesbian identity, affairs, and methods for seduction. Anne's first love was Elizabeth Rain. They first met when sharing a room together at boarding school. It was with Eliza that Anne developed the code she used in her diary. The relationship wasn't questioned at first. It was expected that girls would have schoolgirl crushes on other girls their age, but it was understood that most girls would grow out of them as they got older and got married. But however, Anne did end up getting kicked out of her boarding school for her relationship with Eliza. She was the one to end the relationship. This caused Eliza to spiral and be committed to an asylum. After Eliza, Anne had an affair with Isabella Norcliffe. Isabella asked Anne to be life partners, to which she declined, crushing Isabella. She remained single for the rest of her life after that. It was Isabella who introduced Anne to Maria Belcombe Lawton, who would eventually become the greatest love of Anne's life. Anne and Mariana would have an on and off relationship for about 20 years. Mariana married Charles Lawton with the hope that he would eventually die and she would be free to marry Anne. These plans, however, did not come to fruition. Charles was aware of the ongoing affair between Anne and Mariana, but let it happen. He also had a string of affairs of his own that Mariana knew about. A big source of tension in Anne and Mariana's relationship was Anne's gender presentation. Anne had often had a masculine appearance, wearing a black suit and top hat. Because of this, she was given the derogatory name that you might have heard of, Gentleman Jack. This made Mariana and many of her other lovers embarrassed to be seen with her in public. While in Paris, Anne had a 2-year-long affair with the widow, Maria Barlow, but Anne's most substantial relationship was with Anne Walker. In 1834, they got married, exchanging rings and vows in February and receiving communion together on Easter Sunday. Afterward, they took honeymoon together. They stayed together until Anne Lister's death, and after which Anne Walker dressed in mourning and moved through society as a widow. She had already struggled with her mental health prior to Anne Lister's death, and was also committed to an asylum in her later years. This quote comes from Anne Lister's diary. I love and only love the fairer sex, and thus beloved by them in turn, my heart revolts from any other love than theirs. Wu So was a poet born around 1800 in Shujiang, China. Although she did marry, she often sought the company of women as friends and lovers. Many of her more erotic poems were written for her lovers. She is known as one of China's greatest poets, and unlike some of her Western contemporaries, she was known openly as a lesbian poet. She spent the last few years of her life in seclusion, so not much is known about her death, but she allegedly died in 1862. Wu wrote this poem for one of her lovers. On your slender body, your jane and coral girdle ornaments chime, like those of a celestial companion come from the green jade city of your heaven. One smile from you when we meet, and I become speechless and forget every word. For too long you have gathered flowers and leaned against the bamboos, your green sleeves growing cold, and your deserted valley. I can visualize you all alone, a girl harboring her cryptic thoughts. You glow like a perfumed lamp in the gathering shadows. We play wine games and recite each other's poems. Then you sing Remembering South of the River with its heartbreaking verses. Then we paint each other's beautiful eyebrows I want to possess you completely, your jade body and your promised heart. It is spring, vast mists cover the 5 lakes. My dear, let me buy a red painted boat and carry you away. Emily Dickinson is arguably the most famous female poet of the 19th century. She was born in Amherst, Massachusetts on December 10th, 1830, and died on May 15th, 1886. She not only wrote many love poems about women, she often referred to herself using masculine pronouns, calling her childhood her boyhood, and signing letters as Brother Emily. Her poems began to be re-examined in 1998 with the use of infrared technology. These scans found that the name Susan had been censored from many of her poems. Emily and Susan Gilbert began their friendship in 1850. Around the time, Susan started courting Emily's brother, Austin. Sue and Austin eventually did get married in 1856. Through this, Sue and Emily's relationship came with its own challenges. They had multiple periods where they became estranged, most notably between 1850 and 1851, and again in the mid-1850s. In 1854, Emily wrote, "Sue, you can go or stay. There is but one alternative. We differ often lately, and this must be the last." Unfortunately, since all of Emily's saved correspondence was burned following her death, the nature of any of these breakups is unknown. Despite this, Emily and Sue continued to reconcile, and they remained close until Emily's death. When she died, it was Sue who wrote her obituary and dressed her for the funeral. She included cypredium, violets, and heliotropes in the casket. These flowers symbolize faithfulness and devotion. Sue and Austin, on the other hand, had a deeply unstable relationship. Austin had a well-known and long-running affair with family friend Mabel Todd. The entire Dickinson family, including Sue and their 3 children, were aware of the affair. After Emily's death, it was Mabel who edited Emily's poems for publication. Mabel went to great lengths to cast Emily in the role of the reclusive spinster in white, and Sue as the cruel sister-in-law, when in reality, Mabel had never met Emily. This poem comes from one of Emily's letters. Her breast is fit for pearls, but I was not a diver. Her brow is fit for thrones, but have not a crest. Her heart is fit for home. I, a sparrow, build their suite of twigs and twine my perennial nest. In her first publication of Emily's work, Mabel said that this had been written to a male friend of Emily's. In the late 1990s, a study of the original poem found that the name Sue had been erased. Sarah Orne Jewett was an American novelist born on September 3rd, 1849 in South Berwick, Maine, and died on June 24th, 1909. Many of her novels were feminist rallying cries and featured relationships between women. Sarah had many relationships with women, including Grace Gordon, Kate Burkhead, Georgie Halberton, Ella Warworth, and Ellen Mason. However, her most important relationship was with Annie Adam Fields. After Annie's husband died in 1881, she and Sarah started living together in what was called a Boston marriage, which was when 2 women were living together independently of a man. Beyond that, Sarah and Annie lived together as an actual married couple. Based on an unpublished poem from Sarah, we know that they exchanged vows and rings with one another. Their relationship would last 30 years until Sarah's death. Annie was also a diarist in her own right. After Sarah's death, the remainder of Annie's diary is filled with entry after entry about her grief over losing Sarah. In 1911, Annie published a book full of their letters to each other, which was shocking considering most women in Boston marriages would burn their correspondence to each other. Luckily, scholars enjoyed the book. They were very fond of the deep friendship between the 2 of them. Sarah wrote this poem 1 year after she and Annie exchanged vows. Do you remember, darling, a year ago today when we gave ourselves to each other, before you went away, at the end of that pleasant summer weather, which we had spent by the sea together? How little we knew, my darling, all that the year would bring. Did I think of the most wretched mornings when I should kiss my ring and long with all my heart to see the girl who gave the ring to me? We have not been so sorely, darling, we loved each other so. We will not take back the promises we made a year ago. And so again, my darling, I give myself to you, with graver thought than a year ago, with love that is deep and true. Sorry, Alice French was born on March 19th, 1850 in Andover, Massachusetts, and died on January 9th, 1934 in Davenport, Iowa. She was well known for her novels and short stories, which she published under the name Octave Thanet. By 1890, she was in a relationship with her widowed friend Jane Allen Crawford. They renamed their shared home in Iowa Thanford, which was a combination of both their last names. They lived together until Jane's death in 1932. Violet Page, who would later go by the pen name Vernon Lee, was born on October 14th, 1856, in Boulogne, France, and died February 13th, 1935, in Lombardy, Italy. Vernon was best known for her speculative fiction and short stories. She had a number of relationships with women, including Mary Robinson, Clementia Ann Struther, Thompson, and Amy Levy. Like many Sapphic women of the period, she frequently dressed in masculine clothing. Her most two notable relationships were with Mary Robinson and Clementia Ann Struther Thompson. She met Mary in 1880. The pair spent many years traveling together until Mary's marriage in 1888. Oops, it's fine. Vernon was completely devastated by Mary's engagement, but the two of them did renew their friendship years later. The same year that Mary got married, Vernon met Clementia. They lived together for the next 10 years, openly describing themselves as lovers, friends, and co-authors. Clementia ended their relationship in 1898, but they remained close friends. Born on July 2nd, 1869, in Sarthe, France, Leanne de Pougy is a little unlike the writers we've covered so far. She was raised in a nunnery and ran away at 16 with Joseph Porpe. They married soon after Leanne got pregnant. Joseph turned out to be physically abusive, leading Leanne to leave her husband and her infant and to start a career as courtesan and performer in Paris. This is where she met writer Natalie Clifford Barney. Their relationship lasted for about a year. They broke up after Natalie repeatedly tried to save Leanne from life as a courtesan, but they did continue to have an on and off affair for many years. Leanne wrote about their relationship in her novel, Ideal Sapphic. Leanne ended up marrying Prince George Gika in 1910. He did leave her for another woman in 1928, but ended up coming back the following year. It was this new marriage that caused her to become deeply committed to Catholicism, which she remained until her death on December 22nd, 1950, in Lausanne, Switzerland. This is a quote from Leanne about her relationship with Natalie. That was in the days of the Amazon's youth and of my own. We were passionate rebels against a woman's lot, voluptuous and cerebral little apostles, rather poetical, full of illusions and charms. We loved long hair, pretty breasts, pouts, simpers, charm, grace, not boyishness. Speaking of Natalie Clifford Barney was born on October 31st, 1876 in Dayton, Ohio, and died on February 2nd, 1972 in Paris, France. When she was 5 years old, she met Oscar Wilde at a New York hotel. Over the course of their stay, Oscar convinced Natalie's mother to seriously pursue a career in art, and no doubt had an impact on Natalie. Natalie knew she was a lesbian by the age of 12. She was determined to, quote, live openly without hiding anything. Some scholars consider her the first woman since Sappho to write openly about female love. After a society gossip paper wrote about Natalie's poems, her father bought all the remaining stock, and as well as the printing plates, and had them destroyed. However, some publications misinterpreted her poems. The Washington Mirror wrote how she writes odes to men's lips and eyes, not like a novice either. Natalie was openly opposed to monogamy, a fact that infuriated many of her lovers. She once read out a list of all her relationships, putting them into 3 categories: liaisons, demi-liaisons, and adventures. Her most important relationships were considered liaisons, and her affairs were demi-liaisons. And her relationship with Air de Lennox was an adventure. Natalie's first relationship was with Eva Palmer in 1893. They met on summer vacation in Maine, eventually moving to Paris together, but their relationship fell apart after Eva moved to Greece with Angelos Sicilianos. In November 1899, Natalie met Renee Vivian. Renee later recalled it being love at first sight. Both poets were inspired by Sappho in their creative works and learned Greek to translate her fragments. They also both wrote plays about her life. Their first breakup came in 1901. Natalie tried to get her back for years afterward. She recruited her opera singer friend to sing underneath Renee's window while Natalie tossed up a bouquet of flowers and a poem up to her. Both the poem and the flowers were intercepted by a governess and never made it to Renee. But they did finally reconnect in 1904 after Natalie presented her with a poem about their relationship. After that, they moved to Lesbos and considered opening a school of poetry for women. But sometime later, Renee received a letter from her lover, the Baroness Helen von Zulen. Renee went to Constantinople, intending to break off the relationship and then meet Natalie in Paris. However, Renee never made the return journey. She stayed with the Baroness, and this time their breakup was permanent. Natalie had a brief affair with Olive Custance in 1901 after the pair exchanged letters and poems for a year. Natalie began her relationship with Elizabeth de Grammont in 1910. Elizabeth's husband eventually found them out, leading to the couple's divorce in 1920 after a lengthy separation. Natalie and Elizabeth stayed together until Elizabeth's death in 1954. There is also Natalie's relationship with Dolly Wilde, the niece of Oscar Wilde. They met in 1927, staying together until Dolly's death in 1941. In her will, Dolly named Natalie as her sole heir. And then Natalie's longest relationship was with Romaine Brooks, who she met in 1915. The relationship lasted over 50 years, eventually ending in the last few years of their lives. In relation to her sexuality, Natalie said, "My queerness is not a vice. It is not deliberate and harms no one." The previously mentioned Colette was born on January 28th, 1873 in Burgundy, France, and died on August 3rd, 1954 in Paris. She was known as one of the most famous French writers of all time. Colette originally married Henri Gautier-Villars in 1893. Henry was 14 years older than her. They separated in 1906 before permanently divorcing in 1910. Henry owned the copyright to all of her books that she'd written while they were married. So she had to turn to journalism, photography, and stage acting to make ends meet. This is also when she started having affairs with women, including Natalie Barney and Mathilde de Mornay, better known as Max. Max also had an affair with Leanne de Pougy. On January 3rd, 1907, Max and Colette shared an onstage kiss. The backlash was so severe that the pair had to stop living together. However, their relationship did continue for 5 more years. In 1921, Colette married Henri de Javenil. They had a daughter together in 1915 and got divorced in 1924. Colette married for the final time in 1925 to Maurice Godakit. He was 16 years younger than her. Renee Vivian was born on June 11th, 1877, in London, England. She was the first queer woman to translate Sappho. Her first love was her childhood friend, Violet Shillito. Their romance was unrequited, and Violet died of typhoid at the turn of the century. Many of Renee's first love poems were written about her. Violet was actually the person who introduced Renee to Natalie. After Renee left Natalie for the Baroness Helen, the Baroness left Renee in 1907 for another woman. This was a blow to Renee, causing her to turn to drugs and alcohol. From this period until her death, Renee's neighbor and friend, Colette, felt deeply concerned for Renee's well-being. This concern was well placed, as in 1908, Renee tried to kill herself with laudanum. She did ultimately survive the attempt, but her health suffered, and from then until her death on November 18th, 1909, she suffered poor health. She eventually died of pneumonia. This was a poem of Renee's. The trees have kept some lingering sun from their branches, veiled like a woman, evoking another time. The twilight passes weeping. My fingers climb, trembling, provocative. The line of your haunches, my ingenious fingers wait when they have found the petal flash beneath the robe they part. How curious, complex, the touch that's the subtle art. As the dream of fragrance, the miracle of sound, I follow slowly the graceful contours of your hips, the curves of your shoulders, your neck, your unpieced breasts, in your white voluptuous, my desire rests, swooning, refusing itself the kisses of your lips. Going back to the States, we have Amy Lowell, who was born on February 9th, 1874, in Brookline, Massachusetts, and died on May 12th, 1925. Amy was very open about her sexuality and wore masculine clothing. Amy met actress Ada Dwyer Russell in 1912, and they began living together after Ada retired from the stage in 1914. Amy had wanted to dedicate all of her books to her, but she refused, scared of the attention that it would bring. Ada was raised as a member of the Mormon Church. She never publicly left the religion, but she did stop attending gatherings. In 1913, her father was asked to leave the church by its leaders after telling other members that same-sex relationships were not a sin. After Amy's death, all of their correspondence was burned by Ada. We do have elements of Amy's queerness through her poems. The west wind has been lifted a scarf on the seat close behind me. The blue of it is a violent outrage of color. She draws it more closely about her, and it ripples beneath her, slightly stirring. Her kisses are sharp buds of fire, and I burn back against her, a jewel, hard and white, a stalked flaming flower, till I break to a handful of cinders, and open my eyes to the scarf, shining blue in the afternoon sunshine. How loved clocks can tick when a room is empty, and I is alone. And one is alone, sorry. Moving to the end of the century, Vida Sackville-West was born on March 9th, 1892, in Kent, England, and died on June 2nd, 1962. Her first relationship was a long-standing one with Violet Keppel in their teenage years. Vida was deeply upset when Violet announced her own engagement and went to Paris to convince Violet to end it. The two of them would disappear many times throughout their lives, mostly traveling to France. Their affair eventually ended sometime around 1920, but the two remained devoted to each other. Vida wrote about their relationship in multiple novels, including Portrait of a Marriage and Challenge, the latter of which was banned in the UK until 1974. In 1913, Vida married Harold Nicholson. They had an open relationship, with both of them having affairs with people of both genders. Vida had affairs with Virginia Woolf, J.P. Morgan, Hilda Mathewson, and Mary Hutchinson. However, after 1924, all of Vida's affairs were with women. This quote comes from one of Vida's letters to Virginia Woolf. "I'm reduced to a thing that once Virginia. I composed a beautiful letter to you in the sleepless nightmare hours of the night. And it is all gone. I just miss you in a quite simple, desperate human way. Our final writer of the night is the aforementioned Virginia Woolf, who was born on January 25th, 1882, in London, England. She, like many of her lovers, was a member of the Bloomsbury Group, which was a group of British writers, artists, philosophers, and scholars that were known for their liberal views on sexuality. Despite this, she married Leonard Woolf in 1912, having originally turned down his proposal. They also had an open relationship, and Virginia had affairs with many women, including Sybil Colfax, Lady Adeline Morrell, and Mary Hutchinson, who should sound familiar as she was also having an affair with Vida. Virginia and Vida began their relationship in 1925 after having met in 1922. It was Virginia's first and most notable affair, but Vida had been in many relationships with both men and women before, during, and after their time together. Virginia's novel Orlando was essentially a love letter to Vida as their relationship began to change. Their relationship lasted until 1935, but they reconnected in 1937 and remained friends until Virginia committed suicide on March 28, 1941. We also see Virginia refer to Vida in her letters as a Sapphist, which is the first time we kind of see that word. And it's here where we move out of the era of the Boston marriage and into the era of the Sapphics. Through all of these writers, we see that they were undeniably into women. Despite what the Victorians of the era might have thought, these were not schoolgirl crushes. These were real relationships with real passion and feelings. In one of her letters to Vida, Virginia wrote, "Look here, Vida, throw over your man and we'll go to the Hampton Court and dine on the river together and walk in the garden in the moonlight and come home late and have a bottle of wine and get tipsy, and I'll tell you all the things I have in my head, millions, myriads. They won't stir by day, but only by dark on the river. Think of that. Throw over your man, I say, and come." Thank you.